The topic this morning is going to be Obamacare and what's ahead for employers and employees alike. Larry Winter is with us from Winter and Scoggins CPAs, and Brian Peters is with us from Advanced Insurance Strategies. And gentlemen, it's great to have you with us.
Well, it's a delight to be here.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, I think probably the populace is totally confused about Obamacare, what to expect. It is the law of the land. I guess it is going to happen at this point. I understand this legislation is 2,700 pages long. I also understand that it's dependent on coordination among several government agencies. There's new regulations that seem to be launched every time you turn around. Some Democrats have even described this as a train wreck. Let me ask both of you at this point in time, and this could change tomorrow, I guess, but at this point in time, what are your thoughts on Obamacare in general? And Larry, let me direct that to you first.
Well, Dave, I am thrilled with the choice of words that you had in your opening. If our small businessmen are confused, that means they understand the problem perfectly. No one knows. If you recall, Speaker at the time, Nancy Pelosi, said, vote for it now, read it later. Okay? And they're still generating 700 to 800 pages of regulations per week. They know they're not done. They know they're not even close to being done. They had to admit defeat by putting off the consequences to large employers. They don't have a chance of having what needs to be done. Now, are they going to start with an incomplete mess October 1st? Or are they going to kick the can down the road? My hope is that they'll kick the can down the road. But this is a nightmare of unbelievable consequences to us as a nation.
Right.
I would agree with all of what Larry said, is that at this point, I would just add insurance carriers themselves really haven't been able to get a grasp on what they can or can't do at this point, which makes it virtually impossible for a small business owner to make any real decision or understand the impact this law could ultimately have on them. The only option they've really had is to delay this, and whether or not we get a further delay of the individual mandate, I'm concerned that politically they don't want to do that. It frankly needs to happen. We spoke earlier about the training that needs to happen to enroll people in these exchanges. Hasn't happened for any group, including agents. So I really don't see how we're going to be able to efficiently do anything for folks October 1 when it comes to these healthcare exchanges, or now they're referring to them as marketplaces, which I guess that polls better than exchange. So that's where we're at now as far as that's concerned.
So nobody's really prepared at this point, the government, insurance companies, agents, anybody?
I would agree with that. I think the insurance carriers understand what their obligations are ultimately under the law if it's implemented as is, but are they prepared to move forward and be involved with these exchanges? No. Some of the major carriers have even said first year they're not going to participate in the exchanges. They would rather use that time to evaluate how they're working, how well they're working, and whether or not they want to be involved in them going forward. Only a few companies in various states, depending on their market share, have to legally participate in the exchanges. Blue Cross Blue Shield is the only one in Georgia that has to legally participate. There'll be others. So it's perfectly within their rights to abstain from the exchange for the first year or indefinitely for that matter.
So if we pull all this down to our focus today, which is small businessmen, if the experts don't know, if the insurance companies don't know, if the government doesn't know, how are they supposed to know? And the answer is they can't. And therefore, what are most of them going to do? I think throw up their hands in disgust.
Brian, your clients are coming to you, what do I do? What do I do? At this point, you don't know what to tell them, really, do you? I mean, you don't know if this thing is going to be enacted on the 1st or not.
We've really had one overlying strategy, which is in most cases, and it depends if it's a small business owner versus an individual versus a large business, there are aspects and regulations that allow them basically to postpone most of the effects of Obamacare, and that's what we're suggesting they do. In other words, buy as much time as you can so we can see realistically what happens, what options you may have. Luckily in health insurance, whether it be an individual or small group, when you obligate yourself to an insurance company, it's a little different. You're really renting insurance from them, and the fact that you don't have to continue, you're not signing a year lease or obligation. You're agreeing that they will charge you a certain price typically for a year, but you're buying the insurance on a monthly basis. So we're having our clients get as long of a commitment as they can from the insurance carrier, knowing that they're going to be looking at whatever options are available and that come to fruition, when that case, whenever that may be.
Right, gotcha. Well, the employer mandate has been much in the news and much discussed, a provision that requires employers with more than 50 full-time workers to offer coverage or pay a fine, I guess. There's also, I understand, lots of reporting requirements. Talk about the mandate and how is this delay going to change the world as we know it?
The delay itself, frankly, is just that. I think most large employers had started the process, at least of a discussion of what was being required of them from what they knew. The unfortunate part is the regulations, as Larry mentioned too, although they're coming out fast and furious, there really wasn't a lot of detail on exactly how they had to report not only information about their number of employees, but also how many full-time employees they have and whether or not those full-time employees were eligible for insurance. That really was the more detailed portion of the reporting. Seeing that the government was not able to provide the information to the employers, it became obvious that there was no way that this was going to be able to be complied with by January 1, 2014, so they had to delay it. Unfortunately, large employers, I think, see it as a reprieve, but at that point, that's all it is. They're still looking at the same scenario that they were before, which is we're going to be penalized if we don't offer coverage that's either affordable and considered minimum value. And so now they'll have more times to work with their, hopefully their insurance agents or accountants once this information comes out to comply. But that portion is still going to be a huge burden on businesses when and if they, have to do that.
Now, isn't there an element here of honor system in terms of what your employer will or won't do?
The exchange piece of it is where that comes into play. The exchange, part of being eligible for the exchange is reporting whether or not your employer offers coverage and whether or not it's affordable and minimum value. Well, there's not going to be a way for the exchanges to verify that based on the fact that the employers don't have to report that information now for the next year until 2015. So realistically, you could have people enrolling in the exchanges getting taxpayer dollars, subsidies, with really no way of verifying whether or not they're getting those subsidies legally or correctly.
Interesting. Larry, when this was being sold, we were told as American citizen taxpayers that we would be able to keep the coverage that we had. Is that a reality now?
No. But we were sold a lot of things in the rhetoric of the rush of 2 to 3 days to pass a bill that the majority of the members of Congress that voted for it never read, never understood it, still do not understand it, still have not read it. And yet, it's going to be affecting 23% of our GDP. That means our economy. How in the world this was ever allowed to get this far is beyond comprehension to a simple businessman.
Incredible. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I agree with Larry once again that the ability to keep your plan really was never at the employer or employee level. Will some of them technically still have the same plan after the January 1, 2014? It's possible. I can tell you from a realistic standpoint, not very probable. But at the end of the day, that really wasn't something that could honestly be promised it was, because the employers are purchasing insurance for the most part, the folks that we're talking about, the 100 employees and under, and the company has to comply with these new regulations. And for them to keep plans that don't comply along with ones that do, most of the major carriers have made a decision, we're not going to do that.
Are policies being canceled as we speak?
They're being notified of cancellation, sure.
Moving from small to large, organized labor didn't realize this was here. And
they supported it, now they don't.
Yeah.
Now they don't, because of just the thing that we talked about. They thought they'd get to keep their plan, and now they realize, no, they won't. And, in the area of state and municipal government, there are a lot of economic studies out right now that the majority of them will be better off to force their retirees to the exchanges. And they'll save millions or billions of dollars by doing so, which I'm sure the people who voted for it didn't realize what they were going to be doing to their constituents.
It seems like, according to surveys that I've seen, most Americans are not pleased with Obamacare. I think that's over half, but depending on which poll you look. They appear to be nervous about this whole thing. Let me run through some groups, and I'll give you these one at a time, and you can comment on them, and how you see these people being affected as we speak, long-term and short-term. And the first one is employers, and I think you probably answered some of that already. But I guess small employers don't know what they're going to do at this point in time, it sounds like.
Well, I told my clients, wait till September 1st and let's see if it's clear that we have some comprehension as what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it's only 30 days away, and I don't think it's going to get that much clearer between now and then. So I think you're right. I don't think small employers know what to do because their advisors don't know what's going on.
Taking that even more specifically, what we know as far as the fees that have been implemented through this new law is that small employers, although not affected by the large subsidy penalties, what I think most of them fail to probably understand now, because they haven't seen it yet, is that there's a couple carriers out now, insurance carriers, that have provided some nice tools to show how much these fees are going to have an impact on their rates. So despite the effect of community rating, which is going to lump everybody's rates together, just across the board, the fees themselves looks like it's going to increase rates about 18%. So just apples to apples, a small carrier now buying a similar plan, there's 18% of additional fees now that the carriers or the reinsurance companies have had to pay that now have to be borne by the policyholder, because the insurance carriers are just going to pass that along.
And how these things are rated, let's say you're a small employer and you've got a young workforce. Well, community ratings means it's the average. So where you were getting a benefit, your rates are going up. What are your young people going to do, especially the bulletproof men who are 18 to 30? I mean, it's a hard sell to get them to get insurance to begin with, and now their insurance premiums go up a great deal. What's going to happen here? So again, if you've got an extremely old, very sick workforce, you might actually save a little bit of money, net of the 18%. But most folks are going to see another increase, and I know many of my clients are just going to throw up their hands and say, okay, we're not going to provide insurance to anybody, we're just going to pay the fine.
Now, are your clients making short-term, or can you make short-term arrangements, wondering if this thing is actually going to go into effect January 1 or not?
Short-term arrangements from the aspect of extending their current plan, I would say yes. Now, I can tell you that what's been a rare occurrence is anybody looking at starting a new group plan in this past 2 years, frankly. I can count on my fingers of how many new companies have now decided just to start a group plan in the midst of all this. So that's already had an impact where folks are not wanting to wade into this, to this creek right now, not knowing if they're going to, be flooded. But from that standpoint, I would say that, there's not a whole lot they can do a short-term plan. I've had to advise our clients that although this exchange should be up and running January 1, if you're going to make a decision based on that, be aware that there's risk with that, because from our standpoint, we see some real issues between now and January 1 of this thing being up and running and working efficiently. So we haven't allowed anybody to make a decision that we haven't duly informed that there's risk involved.
Okay.